Hello, you're on Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to this new edition of your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. Let's get on with the show with our top stories today. Lucile Cornet-Vernet is our guest this week. While nothing predestined this Parisian orthodontist to shift to work with artemisia, this plant used in the prevention and treatment of malaria has changed her life. She founded the House of Artemisia to promote the use of this plant. The first mission of our organization is to speed up research on this plant. I was going to say on these plants because we're working on two plants, Artemisia annua from China and Artemisia afra from Africa. 15 million people benefit from the waters of Lake Chad, an endangered heritage to be preserved in the heart of the Sahel.
Well, before I was a fisherman, now I'm a farmer. The fish are scarce and fishing is difficult. Since I made the move to farming, I have lived happily and without any debts.
Healing with plants is gaining ground in Benin, and some even dream of treating COVID-19 with traditional medicine.
That I also go to the pharmacy to get some products, but I use natural plants because my parents got me used to them from birth.
Unfortunately, the situation is deteriorating rapidly in the Lake Chad region. NGOs working there are warning of an upsurge in armed attacks, and 10,000 people have fled violence since early January. It's bad news for the states of the Lake Chad Basin that have been working these past years to take advantage of its natural resources, like here in this report. Take a look.
Lake Chad lies in the heart of the Sahel, a semi-arid region that reaches up to the southernmost limits of the Sahara Desert. The inhabitants of the Sahel, mostly living in rural areas, are amongst the poorest people on the planet. They survive from the natural resources available. The climate here is actually very changeable and at the whim of extreme weather, ranging from droughts to floods. As a result, food security is a constant worry. In recent years, successive droughts, coupled with frequent armed conflicts against rebels and extremist groups, have pushed many people from the surrounding countries of Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria to seek refuge on the shores and islands of Lake Chad. The lake's basin also covers a part of the Central African Republic and Libya. Despite numerous environmental, social and political challenges, the 2 million people living in the surrounding areas have turned it into an oasis of relative prosperity. The size of Lake Chad varies enormously depending on the seasons. There are also long-term changes. Over the past century or so, the lake has risen and fallen by as much as 10 times its volume. To adapt to this changing situation, local inhabitants have developed innovative systems to maintain a reliable food supply. When the lake's waters retreat during the dry season, they cultivate the freshly exposed fertile land. As the water levels rise and fall, the same area of land can be used to fish, to farm, or raise livestock. Well, before I was a fisherman, now I'm a farmer. The fish are scarce and fishing is difficult. Since I made the move to farming, I have lived happily and without any debts. Thanks to these pragmatic solutions, the land around Lake Chad has become very productive and is now an essential source of food for the 15 million people living in the lake's hinterland. Inevitably, there is strain on social structures. Drastic demographic changes resulting from waves of migration and a high birth rate have tested the lake's resources to the limit. Claims to certain areas of land have been a source of tension between different ethnic groups, as well as between farmers and livestock breeders. Although long-term climate change forecasts are not infallible, the region will most probably see less rain in the coming years. Without a well-thought-out strategy for irrigation, the strain on the basin will be enormous. Both scenarios anticipate that the northern part of the lake will dry up and endanger food security for around 4 million people.
Le lac Tchad d'avant et d'aujourd'hui, il y a une grande différence.
What a difference between the Lake Chad of yesterday and the one we see today. In what respect? Well, before there were far more species of fish. Now fish populations are down and fishermen find it a lot harder to make a decent catch. Adapting to the changing situation calls for greater flexibility to address social and environmental weaknesses. The inhabitants around Lake Chad need to be aware of the present and future changes in water levels and climate and adapt to them. Women have a particularly important part to play. They often communicate precious know-how and implement family-based strategies to adapt to changing situations. Despite their key role, women have little access to financial and technical resources. The member states of the Lake Chad Basin have shown their shared determination to promote sustainable development and preservation of the lake's resources by investing in institutions, information and infrastructure.
With the little resources we have in the region, we have been working towards ameliorating the situation, but the situation has become more grave now with the serious implication of the climate change, the serious implication of terrorism, and of course the fall in the oil revenue that the countries are getting. Makes it imperative on us to request the support of the international community.
With a combined effort by member states, the international community, and a revitalized Lake Chad Commission, the lake and its dependent territories can be developed without jeopardizing the lake's social and environmental potential.
As I mentioned earlier, our guest founded the House of Artemisia in 2012 to promote the use of this plant, which has been used for centuries in traditional Chinese medicine. Artemisia decoctions offer a powerful treatment against malaria, and in Africa an effective alternative for those who do not have access to expensive treatments. Lucile Cornet-Vernet shared with Laurent Soustras and Thierry Schiller how she started this fight.
Lucile Cornet-Vernet, hello. You are the head of the Artemisia House, founded in 2012. How did you come across this plant from China?
Bonjour, j'ai rencontré cette plante en
Hello.
2012 grâce
I
à un
came
éleveur
across
qui
this
s'appelle
plant in
Alexandre
2012 thanks to a friend of mine named Alexander Poussin, who crossed Africa on foot with his wife Sonia and who fell seriously ill from malaria in Ethiopia. He was treated in a bush clinic that had run out of anti-malarial drugs, and he was treated by an American doctor, sister, who ran this small clinic.
ce petit dispensaire.
With high-dose artemisia herbal tea, and from that a kind of revolt started within me, which has evolved into the creation of this House of Artemisia. I mean, how, when Africans in particular are the most impacted by malaria, and there is a plant that can grow in all these people's gardens that cures malaria, how was it not more commonplace?
Donc ça a commencé vraiment par une interrogation, puis une sorte de colère.
So it really started with a question and then a sort of anger that said it's not possible that more attention is not given to this type of treatment that can be accessible to all.
J'ai continué à travailler sur.
And that's how I continued to work on the bibliography to see all that has been written about this plant, to meet specialists of this plant, and then little by little to weave a network of doctors, pharmacists, agronomists, people who work on this plant all together.
And what is the primary mission of your NGO today?
La première mission de notre association, c'est d'accélérer la.
The first mission of our organization is to speed up research on this plant. I was going to say on these plants because we're working on two plants, Artemisia annua from China and Artemisia afra from Africa.
C'est évident de faire de la recherche j'allais dire, au standard.
It is not easy to do research on a plant that everyone can grow in their garden to the international standards of a drug. It takes a lot of money, and no pharmaceutical company wants to put money into a product that everyone will be able to have at home.
Dans un produit que tout le monde va pouvoir avoir chez lui. Il n'y a pas, entre guillemets, de retour sur investissement. Donc, qui va
There's no return on investments, so who will be able to finance this invaluable research, which is essential to really have a 360 degrees understanding of all the characteristics of the ins and outs of the healing effects of these plants that have been used for centuries. It's really not new at all. Simply put, if we want to be able to distribute it on a larger scale, we need new studies and studies that are up to international standards. This is the first mission. We are a humanitarian non-profit association, therefore.
C'est de diffuser de façon très raisonnée cette plante.
The second mission is to disseminate this plant in a very reasoned manner to areas far from health centers that are often difficult to get to be able to give an extremely poor population the possibility of being treated with these plants with the help of a whole medical team affiliated with these houses of artemisia, which we therefore call artemisia houses that cultivate, distribute and then promote these plants to neighboring villages around them. All these doctors, all these pharmacists, all these artemisia houses, which are the centers of expertise with agronomists, doctors, pharmacists, all these artemisia houses are connected and they exchange good practices, their findings, etc.
How's it going with the different training, public awareness and advocacy missions that you deploy on site in artemisia houses in Africa?
Alors, d'une façon générale, les maisons de l'artémisia disposent...
Well, in general, the artemisia houses provide at least one training per month. This depends, of course, on the stage of development of the artemisia house. But for example, in Côte d'Ivoire, there are 8 artemisia houses and they're very active. They hold training sessions, there's someone who schedules the training courses throughout the year, and those people can sign up for them.
Ils font des formations, il y a quelqu'un qui programme les formations sur l'année et ainsi des gens peuvent s'inscrire. Les formations sont payantes.
The training sessions are offered at a reasonable African price as we are part of a normal market, but it doesn't prevent awareness raising in the form of mini trainings where we bring ready-made plants, because it is really the seeding that is complicated with artemisia. Therefore, we actually bring ready-made plants to the villages.
Et donc on apporte en fait dans les villages des plants tout faits, et puis dans la langue locale, les gens des maisons d'artémisia font une petite
And then the artemisia house people do a little presentation of an hour or two in the local language. They explain, and then they also leave artemisia herbal tea with the local clinic when there's one, or with a traditional healer. There you have it. It really happens from person to person in a fairly significant way, in fact. In relation to advocacy, this is important. All artemisia houses have a relationship with the local, regional and national health system. And those of us in France also have a relationship with almost all the health ministries of all the African countries where we are established. Unlike us in France, at ministerial level they have in fact separated allopathic health, European, northern and traditional health. Today there's really a completely regulated career path for traditional medicine, which we are for, of course.
Réglementé aujourd'hui de médecine traditionnelle dans lequel on s'inscrit bien entendu.
What are the main obstacles that you encounter today in Africa?
On n'en rencontre pas beaucoup. Ça, c'est la première chose.
We don't encounter many obstacles, that's the first thing. We don't encounter many, first of all, because for more than 80% of Africans, their treatment of choice is plant-based. So they're used to making herbal teas, they're used to the consumption of plants. In fact, treating oneself for malaria with a herbal tea is nothing strange for Africa, it's completely normal.
Rien de bizarre pour l'Afrique, c'est tout à fait normal, quelque part. Ce qui est plus difficile pour le coup, c'est...
What is more difficult though is when it comes to health systems that are more of a copy of those in the north, meaning the big hospitals.
Donc les grands hôpitaux, etc. Mais quelque part, c'est pas notre cible.
But actually, this isn't our target area either. So in fact, if they have a good flow of their stock in medicine, that's fine.
L'artémisia n'est pas contre le médicament. C'est simplement une autre solution.
And anyway, artemisia is not against medicine. It is simply another solution, a complementary first-line alternative for uncomplicated unsuspected malaria, which can be made available to people for very little money, and that can bring autonomy to locations that are not easily accessible, such as in certain places during the rainy season, for example.
Pendant la saison des pluies, par exemple.
Welcome back to the second part of our show. I'm now taking you to Benin, where a large part of the population has made the choice to treat themselves with plants, natural solutions that are within easy reach in local markets and built on the continent's rich biodiversity. Suddenly, some traditional therapists are dreaming of inventing a treatment against COVID-19, and voices are being raised to make sure that the ancestral know-how of traditional medicine of the continent are not to be neglected in the research leading to products that meet international standards. This is a report by our correspondent Didier Assogba. According to statistics, 70% of Beninese treat themselves with plants, herbal tea. This is the case of Marshall Hunwanu, a building electrician who, to treat a supposed undiagnosed malaria disease, preferred to go to Mama Weta, a seller of medicinal plants in Goromé, a city on the outskirts of Cotonou. I learned how to compose and sell herbal remedies with my aunt for 9 years. Every day I receive more than 150 clients.
I came to buy some plants to treat malaria and cough. I'm used to plants. This doesn't exclude the fact that I also go to the pharmacy to get some products, but I use natural plants because my parents got me used to them from birth. It is part of our daily life.
For many observers, Africa has the resources to offer an effective product in the treatment of COVID-19. This is due, for example, to the diversity of its natural environments, which range from deserts and steppes to highland meadows and bushes, including mangroves.
Speaking of COVID-19, people feel that it is not possible to find herbal remedies on the African continent. Yet it is the only continent that still has its 9 biomes. And we still have a biodiversity in which it is possible to find plants capable of coping with a large number of diseases.
For the treatment of the coronavirus, the sellers of medicinal plants have offered their customers many solutions as a preventive measure. Against COVID-19, solutions exist here. Certainly, research to find the right combination is still ongoing. Among this research, there's the work of Dr. Raphael Chidime. This Beninese traditional therapist and phytotherapist is convinced that he has found the right formula to fight COVID-19 by treating a friend with the disease who is a student in Europe.
And the products that I put in the honey, I prepared on a fire at 100 degrees. I extracted the syrup from the ingredients that I mixed with the alcohol from the plants in my container. I made a 25-litre can of honey with my plant.
The solution to the COVID-19 pandemic could lie somewhere between the two medicines, conventional and traditional. One thing is certain, for herbalists and botanists on the continent, traditional African medicine, the oldest in the world, should not be overlooked.
La promotion de la médecine traditionnelle.
The promotion of traditional medicine must therefore be accompanied by efforts at the level of conventional medicine, where we should take what is positive in each of these two medicines so that they can become complementary. And this calls for the notion of research and the notion of the validation of therapeutic formulas at the level of traditional medicine. Practitioners who are great holders of this knowledge and of this medicine, and who are closer to the populations.
A hope that had taken a big leap forward in September 2020, when a panel of experts appointed by the WHO, the World Health Organization, had approved a protocol for phase-3 clinical trials of herbal medicine for COVID-19. This is the first step to assess the quality, safety, and efficacy of traditional medicine products according to international standards. Well, let's now get back to our guest this week, Lucile Cornet-Vernet, for the final part of our interview. She tells us how she learned that artemisia was included in some treatments for SARS and COVID-19 in China. Listen to her.
Lucile Cornet-Vernet, let's talk more about the Artemisia afra and Artemisia annua. These are plants that have been used for centuries to prevent and treat malaria and certain parasitic diseases. Is that correct?
Exactement. Donc l'Artemisia annua est extrêmement connue.
Exactly. Artemisia annua is extremely well known since artemisinin, which is the drug of choice to treat malaria all over the world, is extracted from this plant, often mixed with another.
L'Artemisia annua vient de Chine.
Artemisia annua comes from China. It is an annual plant from Sichuan. It grows in the highlands, and therefore in the beginning it was not at all suitable for Africa. For decades it was adapted little by little anyway, and today we truly have plants that can grow in biotype environments as different as the sub-Saharan or fully tropical. In fact, the Artemisia annua plant has hundreds of active ingredients. That's why it is also used in treatment of other parasitic infections.
Il y en a 23 qui ont été
There are 23 that have been isolated that are useful in treating Plasmodium, the infectious agent of malaria. Thus, we could say that it is actually combination therapy.
C'est quand même une polythérapie, ça n'est pas une thérapie avec simplement.
It is not a therapy with only artemisinin, which is very well known. There are other molecules that also have other very important advantages in treating malaria.
Pour l'Artemisia afra, c'est une plante aussi.
As for Artemisia afra, it is a plant native to Africa, but it is not an annual like Artemisia annua. It's a large shrub, perennial, that is widely used in South Africa. And then it went up the rift, and we now find it as far as Ethiopia. It is a very pretty bush. It can be cut several times a year. That is very bitter. The herbal tea is very bitter, but it grows on the plateau and it grows where there is no malaria, so it is always used against parasitic infections.
Et de plus en plus d'études sont faites
intestinal worms, and more studies are being done on its value when it comes to a particular parasitic disease, malaria. So these two plants are of course quite familiar to traditional healers or herbalists in Asia as well as in East Africa.
De façon tout à fait évidente.
How did African scientists get hold of this plant, and in what way is it used?
Il y a beaucoup de publications qui viennent d'Afrique du Sud sur
There are many publications that come from South Africa on Artemisia afra. There are quite a few publications on Artemisia annua that come from African teams, of course.
Encore une fois, il n'est pas évident.
Once again, it is not at all easy to have sufficient funds to carry out studies to international standards. It is very difficult for them to have enough money to do the right studies.
Pour eux d'avoir suffisamment d'argent pour faire les bonnes études. Il s'agit la plupart du temps de tisanes ou de décoctions.
Most of the time it is herbal teas or concoctions, and for the dosage level most of the time it's also quite simple.
Aussi assez simple. Voilà, c'est 5 grammes.
It is 5 grams, which is a handful of dry leaves and stems in a liter of boiling water, and this herbal tea will be drunk by the sick person for an entire day. Each day it must be prepared again, of course. A herbal tea isn't good for days.
Et puis, ce qui est vraiment très important.
And then what is also really very important is the way in which the plant is cultivated. Of that, we in the Artemisia houses are very careful. We actually have a huge manual. These are plants that if you want them to have enough active ingredients, they must be cultivated properly, have enough water, enough compost. It is in fact the whole chain that is very important, from the seed to how it is used by a family. And that is why we made all these Artemisia houses, to have these centers of expertise, to have these places that teach people how to use it correctly.
Pour que les gens l'utilisent correctement.
Artemisia has been talked about a lot since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. We learnt that the plant had been used in China as a treatment for SARS back in 2003 and for COVID today. Did you immediately understand that the herbal tea could have healing effects against COVID-19?
Alors, en février, oui. En février,
in February, yes, in February I looked at the bibliography. That's always how we start, and that's indeed when I realized that the plant Artemisia annua was used in China in 2003 and then again today for COVID-19. From that moment on, we worked a lot here with a whole bunch of doctors, of people who were a huge help to us in making documents that we were able to give to all Artemisia houses And more importantly, we sent them to the African Ministries of Health, since at the time we absolutely did not know how this virus was going to spread. And we thought, remember in March, that there was going to be a huge death toll in Africa, and we said to ourselves, but we must have the possibility of giving artemisia to people who needed it. It happened quite like that.
Madagascar has produced and marketed its COVID organics. Are we now starting to have more insight into the effects of this drug?
Alors, j'espère. J'espère qu'il y a des études en cours.
Well, I hope so. I hope that there are studies underway on this dissemination of artemisia throughout an entire country. It is unique, in fact, that for such a major pandemic, a herbal drug could be given to a population on such a large scale. In addition, in Madagascar, they have malaria. They have bilharzia or schistosomiasis. We know very well that artemisia annua is active against these two diseases. So I hope that their public health system and maybe the WHO or other global institutions are doing studies to see the impact or decline of these diseases in the population. I hope so, because it's a really unique case.
De ces maladies dans la population, j'espère, parce que c'est vraiment unique.
So should the WHO, the World Health Organization, set aside more resources for clinical trials of herbal medicines?
En tout cas, l'OMS encourage les essais cliniques.
In any case, the WHO supports clinical trials with a whole set of guidelines. It cannot fund itself since it is not a pharmaceutical company, and therefore it is up to states, governments and public institutions to carry out these studies on a common good, which is a plant.
L'artemisia est une plante, il y en a plein d'autres.
Artemisia is a plant. There are plenty of others that can help with other diseases too, and it would be worthwhile in a period as complicated as ours, with global warming. We're probably not going to have an extremely happy years ahead of us to have a plant that cures such a serious, terrible disease.
Importante, grave même.
That can grow so close to one's home, and that's effective and very inexpensive. This is truly an ideal solution for today.
Est vraiment une solution idéale aujourd'hui.
Thank you very much, Lucile Cornet-Vernet.
Thank you very much. Well, that's it. Initiative Africa is over for today, and of course you can find the interview of Lucile Cornet-Vernet and the replay of our programs on our website africaonair.com, as well as on all our social media channels. Feel free to share, like and comment with the hashtag Initiative Africa TV show, and don't forget, next week same time, same channel, I'll see you again with a new edition of Business Africa. Have a great week everyone, take care and goodbye.